time is almost here for Dudley Emperor to grace his presence onto Vanguard 0. What's going on, team? Proof here. And for this video, it's going to be me showing my Spikes limit break review from back in May once JP got it. And the reason I'm showing it now is because for us on the global side, in one day, tomorrow, we get the set in Vanguard 0 on the global side. And because people wanted me to talk about it then as opposed to doing it now. So it's kind of interesting to go back and see how my thoughts were then. And I still feel pretty much the same now as I did then, with some small differences here and there after seeing some deck lists come out and doing my video with different fight and kind of seeing how some of the cards interacted. But I want to give it to you as is, because that way you can see how I felt back then and then kind of extrapolate from there to see how you might feel about them. I think that'd be a fun exercise. I can't wait to play it. I can't wait to crack open the set, and I can't wait to have it in my stable of Spikes cards going forward. And this review showcases me talking about the old cards with the new cards, because to me, I thought it was important to talk about everything, because some of the cards that we've come to know and love are going to shift or change their purpose or just be out of the deck entirely with the introduction of the new limit break stuff. And I thought it was important to talk about everything together to get a full comprehensive view of Spikes heading into the event. And tomorrow's video is going to be featured my Theorycraft decks that I came up with chat soon after doing this part of the review. So look out for that, and hopefully that gives you some insight to what Spikes have coming down the pipeline. Hopefully between these two videos, it kind of gives you an idea of what you want to do with the cards should you pull them in the event. But I hope you enjoyed the review. Let me know what you think down below. I'm excited to hear what your thoughts are. Let's catch you next time. Peace. Be easy. So we know what Mecha Trainer does. We know what Psychic Mel does. Psychic Mel also came in the first clan event. It was never seen. It never saw play outside of maybe a VP farmer, because it's not as good as Mecha Trainer. And all of the starters have to work under the metric of, are you better than Mecha Trainer, or do you do something that Mecha Trainer lacks that's good enough to be used over Mecha Trainer? Because being able to fish out a perfect guard or another grade 1 unit out of your deck is huge. It's a huge advantage that we get, because we're only one of 2 clans that get a starter like Mecha Trainer. Mecha Trainer and Conroe are those two. So it's a huge advantage to be able to have an on-demand perfect guard for 1 counterblast, and be able to take advantage of it in Spikes. We're not super counterblast heavy, even up to limit break, outside of Dudley Emperor and Dudley Dan if you choose to use it. So you have the ability to use it fairly freely. Thermidor down here, he says on rear guard, when it boosts, you may give that unit plus 2,000 power to the end of the battle. If you gave it plus 2,000 power, at the end of the battle, put that unit on the bottom of your deck. So you want to put this to the side and not behind your Vanguard. You can buff up your Vanguard with it to make it like a pseudo 8K booster. But where it really shines is being able to turn all your units into like the Bracky Reckless Juggernaut Maximum, to be able to boost for power and then get out the way and go back to deck, and it frees up that space for Safe Read and Dudley Emperor, mainly those two. But the issue is that it's a starter, so it competes with that Mecha Trainer slot like I talked about, but it does something different enough and beneficial enough to where there might be some credence there for you to want to use Thermidor over Mecha Trainer. And it uses no counterblast, so you don't have to worry about that when you're trying to make use of your future card skills. I think it might be fun in like a little side deck situation. I don't know if it's going to make the most competitive version of Spikes. And then we got Smart Leader Darkbringer, which is a card that I mistakenly thought was not in the game, at least at the moment. I totally overlooked it when I've used this website before. It's basically like a Forerunner that acts as an additional Skydiver for you. So when its attack hits a Vanguard, put it into the soul, and then call a card from your hand onto a circle. It doesn't need to be open circle like some other Spike Brothers skills. So it can be really useful for multi-attacking purposes. However, I don't think it does enough to make you warrant using it over Mecha Trainer or Thermidor for that matter. To me, it's like the 3rd best starter out of the 4 here, the worst being Mel, even though Mel does have some decent upside to it. But I don't think it does enough for you to warrant using it over Mecha Trainer. We know what Maryland does. We're not getting a different PG. It would be kind of cool if we got the future artwork for Maryland, because I think the future artwork is better than this artwork. BT10, I think is when it came out. Maryland artwork is probably my favorite Perfect Guard art in all of Vanguard. We know what Dan does. We've seen Dan. We know what Reckless does. Reckless gets a lot better in the present set when you incorporate Dudley Emperor into everything, because it helps you enable that 5 attack sequence. So you're probably going to be playing more Reckless Express than you did previously in the builds up to now. Cyclone Blitz, we know what he does. He was pretty terrible. When it attacks Soul Blast 1, it gets plus 2,000 power to the end of the battle. It doesn't remove itself from play or anything, so it doesn't free the space up for later. We got Wonder Boy. We know what he does, the bread. It is going to be interesting to talk about, though, because he's like an anomaly. He's like in that weird no man's land space, because it does offer some benefit to having be vanilla 8K, but it may not offer enough because spikes have a lot of utility grade 1s. Gyro Slinger, just a generic Counterblast 1, 1000 power, that came out. Did we have that one before? I don't think we did. If we did, I totally overlooked it. Gary Gannon, we know what he does. He doesn't get useful until we get to Legion, whenever that pops into Vanguard 0. So we'll talk about that once it comes up. Assault Squad, we know what he does. Basically use the combo with Skydiver. It's in this set, the current set. Okay. I totally overlooked Gyro Slinger. I don't even remember pulling them, honestly. Okay, now we got some new stuff here. So we got Dudley Daisy, which is double rare, it looks like. Rear guard, when placed during your battle phase, Counterblast 1 to get plus 5,000 power to the end of turn. You probably won't be using it for that unless it's like super late game and you need to push for damage, and you can use the 5,000 power to help you hit over your opponent hitting a defensive trigger. But usually why you want to use it is for the Dudley name that it has, because it combos with Jelly Beans, which we're going to talk about, because you can freely search it out. And why that's important is because having back row boosters is such a huge advantage to have, and such a premium card to have a unit in your back row for boosting for power, that being able to have it on demand, because you kind of play however many Dudley Daisies you play plus however many Jelly Beans you play, is kind of like how many Daisies you technically have in your deck. So if you play 4 Daisy and 4 Jelly Beans, it's kind of like you have 8 Dudley Daisies in your deck, because at any moment in time you can fish it out with Jelly Beans if it's in your hand. And that's why it's important to have it. And that's why you're likely going to be playing it over the actual ability. But it does have a little small upside, which you might want to take into consideration. We got Medical Manager, when placed, Soul Charge 1. I think this is better than what people might think it might be, because after thinking about it, you won't be doing a whole lot of soul blasting, and you don't have as much soul generation because you may not be using Dudley Dan like we did in set 1. So being able to have something just to get you a soul on demand is going to be useful for your late game push sequencing, which we'll talk about more later. So as of now, just keep this in the back of your mind as something that you could potentially be using in the future. Scroll down. We got Wild Hitter. This was a promo that we never got in the English game, so people may not be too familiar with what it does. But on rear guard, at the end of the battle, this unit boosted a Vanguard, and the unit's drive check revealed a grade 3. Counterblast 1 and put this unit into your soul, and then call a card from your deck to an open rear guard circle. This card is interesting, but I was never really a huge fan of it because it also came with the open rear guard restriction. If it didn't have that restriction, it'd be so much better, because especially in Vanguard 0, you're going to be giving up your booster to call out a unit that's going to die the following turn. So you can use it to get an interceptor in an emergency situation, but it may not be good enough for you to give up the counterblast and the booster for it unless it's in like an extreme circumstance. And it's also RNG based because you need to check a grade 3 in the process. So I'm not a huge fan of it. It does add soul, but I would rather get the guaranteed soul from Medical Manager over Wild Hitter. But that's just me personally, because I know people that are fans of Wild Hitter that are going to be looking into trying to use it, but me personally, I'm not a huge fan of it. And then we got Cheer Girl Carol, which is another promo we never got in English. But when placed, one of the other units gets plus 2,000 power to the end of turn. This one may not see a whole lot of use. Like, it is nice to have it, but there are better grade 1s out there. And the reason we would probably play it doesn't currently exist in the game, which is being able to have, say well, let me rephrase. When it came out and when we really wanted to come out was during the Break Ride era. So we had Bad End Dragger with Dudley Emperor, and what we could have used Carol for was to make certain cards stronger that had on hit effects to make our opponent put our opponent in a much more difficult situation to guard themselves. In Vanguard 0, with the way the mechanics work, we can currently better set up our plays to hit over certain situations, if I'm saying that correctly. So we can manipulate our board in such a way to be able to hit where we don't need to have Carol factor in really. So I'd rather use something more like the Medical Manager. I'll probably use Wild Hitter more than I would want to use Carol in the deck. So a little unfortunate, and it came out at an awkward time to where even now it still wouldn't see much play. And then we got probably one of my favorite card arts because I think it's hilarious in UFO, Unlucky Flying Object. I keep wanting to call it Unfortunate Flying Object, but when placed during the battle phase, you can filter, which is decent, but we are also playing this in the clan that has Mecha Trainer, so the cards that we probably are trying to filter out, we probably already have them in hand, or we probably want to filter out grade 3s, which kind of is what it is. We can toss those to the void with Dudley Emperor anyway, or Dudley Dan if we still play that. So I don't think it's going to see a whole lot of play even now or going into the future. And then we got Dudley Phantom, which is an interesting card. When it boosts, you may give this unit plus 4,000 power to the end of the battle, and then at the end of the battle, put this unit, which is this meaning Dudley Phantom, put it at the bottom of your deck. So similar to Dudley Daisy, it's going to be useful because it has Dudley in its card name to be searched out with Jelly Beans, and it's an on-demand 10k booster, which might be useful for a lot of your big hitters, such as like your Juggernaut Maximums or your 11k beaters. That way they can hit 21,000 without needing to have a trigger in the process, which is important for us. I think this fits more into like a tech spot more so than a main slot, because the main slot is kind of already chock full of good units that you can fill in that tech spot with a Dudley Phantom or two and be pretty happy with the overall situation of your deck. Let's see, we know Bracky we know and love. Devil Summoner's gonna go down in usage once the set comes out, I believe. Spike Bouncer still gonna be not very useful or awkward. Zachary doesn't get much better, and being a Soul Blast is still not great because we're gonna be using Soul more for Dudley Emperor, and we won't have as many ways to replenish it like we did with Dudley Dan. So I don't think it gets much better going into the Limit Break set. What would you replace Dan with? We'll get to that. We'll get to that in the theory craft, and we'll get to that. Don't worry, we'll cover our bases there. We know about our boy Wakanda. Phantom makes Summoner hit 17 for emergencies. It does, but but it can also make other things hit for higher numbers too in emergencies cases. But I do agree that the existence of Phantom does make Devil Summoner a little bit better, but I still don't think it's going to be worth more than a couple spots. Like, I definitely don't think it's going to be a 4-of. I don't think it's going to be a 4-of slot in Limit Break like it was in base set 4 for Spikes. Then we got Dudley Douglas, which operates the exact same way as Daisy does. So when placed during the battle phase, counterblast 1 to get plus 5,000 power to the end of turn. And similar to Daisy, you're going to be using it more for the fact that it has Dudley in its card name than you are for the counterblast 1, call it during the battle phase. There are going to be certain situations where it is nice to have that ability to counterblast 1 and give it that extra 5,000 power, because Douglas here kind of operates as additional brackies if you are on a Dudley Emperor turn, if you use the additional counterblast, and it lets you get the additional power without the risk of losing the intercept in the process like Bracky would. However, counterblasts do come at a premium, and there's not very many ways. There's 0 ways to countercharge in Spikes outside of healing. So you would want to prioritize your counterblast for Dudley Emperor and Mecha Trainer than you would for Douglas and Daisy. So you're going to be searching out for the on-demand intercept with Jelly Beans more so. And then we have Blow Kiss Olivia. When its attack hits a Vanguard, Soul Blast 2 to retire one of your opponent's rear guards, which I thought it was front row rear guards back in the day. Put this unit on the bottom of your deck. Either way, I think they did change this to make it a little bit better, because I'm pretty sure in the day it was Soul Blast 2 to retire one of your opponent's front row rear guards, so you couldn't touch the back row at all. So if that's the case for this skill, if that's the confirmed skill, then it's much better than it was back in the day. I also think that makes it good because you have to Soul Blast 2, you have to hit Vanguard, and you have to give up an intercept, all for Olivia hitting. I don't think it's worth it in the long run. You can confirm that's how Olivia works? Okay. I still don't think that makes it good enough to run it because you rather put your Soul Blast to other stuff. The best unit for Jelly Beans to get is Dudley Phantom because other Dudley cards benefit from calling them during the battle phase. That's debatable because depending on what your current board situation might be, you might be better off getting Daisy over Phantom because 9k with a 7k makes 16k, which makes 21 with a trigger, versus having Phantom be 15 in that same situation. Then you're gonna have to use Phantom's skill and lose the booster in the process. So there's some situations where you'd rather get something else like Daisy over Phantom in the context of where the game is. And Field Driller, which was a little pet favorite of mine back in the day, when its attack hits a Vanguard, if you have 4 or more other rear guards, draw a card. So back in the day, I really was trying to play like an aggressive spike build and try to have a board full of Field Drillers and just go ham on my opponent, but that never really worked out. I don't suspect it's going to be much better in Vanguard 0 with the damage shield that your opponent can get. So it's going to be hard to make numbers outside of the first one hitting. And even then it's going to turn into you playing an additional 7k that's going to die the very next turn. So I don't think it's going to be much credence to be using Field Driller at the moment. Summoner or Field Driller? Summoner 100%. Because you're more apt to use Summoner early on. And Summoner can get you an additional grade 1 or grade 2 in the current moment, which is better than getting it off the chance of it hitting. And Field Driller promotes you putting more onto the board when you otherwise may not want to. Because if you have a Field Driller on the board that can't activate this ability, then you'd rather be playing something different that has more power to it. And then for the grade 3s, got General Safety we know about. He's going to go down in usage. We got Juggernaut Maximum, which we all know and love. If you're a sub, go ahead and put the Juggy Boy in the chat. He's going to stay the same in terms of viability usage. The difference might be what trigger we assign to him, depending on the makeup of our deck. Oops, I'm going to have to fix the thing at the bottom to account for the bottom 2 cards. Then we got Skydiver, which Skydiver's going to be in a weird spot in Limit Break because on one hand it adds a soul, but then on the other hand, depending on the makeup of our deck, we may not be going for the big Skydiver combo like we have been doing in base set. So he kind of exists in this weird no man's land as well of he's really good, but does he fit in what we're trying to achieve? Because he's far and away better than, say, Unite Attacker, who's going to see 0 use. He's not going to even be the Tech 13 grade 3 anymore. It's going to go to something else. But then where does Skydiver fit in the context of what our deck is trying to achieve? And that's going to be the interesting part to do with Skydiver in your deck building. Because everybody knows the Skydiver Assault Squad combo is very powerful and potent. But now we have other grade 3s in the mix where we might prioritize a different part of our strategy over the Skydiver combo. Then we get Jelly Beans, which is when it's in his hand, you can return to your deck in the main phase, so like Gansalot, Edelrose, etc. To add a grade 2 or lower Dudley from your deck back to your hand. So unlike Edelrose and Gansalot, they only have 1 target. Jelly Beans here has the full spectrum of grade 2 and less Dudleys to choose from, which is insane because you can, in the grade 2 slot, we only have Dudley Douglas for right now, but in the grade 1 slot, we have Dudley Daisy, Dudley Phantom, and Dudley Dan that can all be targets for Jelly Beans. So at any moment in time, if you top deck Jelly Beans for turn or something like that, you can just ship it off back to your deck and grab the grade grab the appropriate Dudley for the situation and add it to your hand, and you get to shuffle it back into your deck to redistribute it. So that's going to be a huge boon for you if you're playing Dudleys, and depending on how you assign your triggers to Jelly Beans if it's in your deck. That way you might have on-demand access to draw triggers or heal triggers. In my mind, it's going to be interesting to see what you're going to do with Juggernaut Maximum versus Jelly Beans if they're in the same deck together, where you're going to assign your trigger action to. Because on one hand, you have Jelly Beans, which can be put back in the deck during the main phase, but Juggernaut Maximum can attack first and then go back to deck and then be called back out later, or it can't be called out at all, but you can shuffle up your deck after you search out with Dudley Emperor, after you sifted your deck of 2 normal units to probably 2 normal units. We don't even have trigger units like that. I digress. After you sift out 2 units from your deck, you can probably give yourself a better chance of checking a heal trigger after you activate Dudley Emperor, which is really good. Wait, doesn't mean Jugs will not be heal. There's a chance. Recyclable heals on their own is really good, but that versatility is strong. Jugs may not be super recyclable if you choose to not run Save Free. Yeah, exactly. Because if your deck focuses more on Dudley Emperor, then you may not want to have Jelly Beans, or you may not want to have Juggernaut Maximum as your heal trigger. You may opt to run it as a draw trigger, because the main sequence might be pulling Juggernaut Maximum out of your deck, which means you've taken the heal out of your deck if you're trying to set up a certain formation for trying to push over a trigger, for example, to where taking out that heal isn't beneficial to you. But if it's a draw trigger and you have something else as a heal, you can take out Maximum for attacking purposes and then check the heal, because you've compressed your deck a little bit to have a better odds of checking the heal trigger. So that's where it's going to be interesting for deck building purposes. But the card that is going to bring all the boys to the yard is buffed up Dudley Emperor. It got buffed up from being a 10k to an 11k, which is huge for spikes. Limit Break 4, when it attacks a Vanguard, Counter Blast 2, and put 1 card, not 2, put 1 card from your hand into the soul. Call 2 units from your deck to open rearguard circles. And then when it is boosted, it gets plus 2,000 power to the end of the battle. So the changes for Dudley Emperor are at the same time good, but then at the same time could be kind of bad, because a big benefit to your late game sequence was being able to use your soul that you've accumulated, which is typically just like riding grade 1 and grade 2. You can soul blast those 2 out for your Bracky, Reckless, Juggernaut and get them back to deck, and then Dudley Emperor would just give you the 2 cards out of your hand, put them into soul, and then search out Bracky and Jugs Reckless again, and then if you needed it, you could soul blast out for their abilities to hit your opponent. Now, since you're only putting 1 card in the soul for Dudley Emperor, you need to account for that in your late game chain of attacks, because you don't want to run out of soul before you can finish off your opponent, depending on what you call out of deck. So that's where it's kind of important to be able to find ways to add soul, in my mind, to be able to account for the fact that you're going to be generating less soul through Dudley Emperor than you have in the past. Now, of course, you can also not use your Bracky, Juggernaut, etc. before that and not burn your soul out, depending on what stage of the game that you're in. But there might be a time and a place to where you need to just burn through your soul really fast, and you need to be able to have a way to replenish it. So it's going to be fun and interesting to look into. And the buffed up power of it means that it becomes a 14k while boosted. So if it has any 7k behind it, it becomes 21k, which is important for Dudley Emperor, but bad for Wonder Boy. Because part of what made Wonder Boy very useful in Limit Break was that you could search it out through Mecha Trainer and then just plop it behind Vanguard and have a 21k line in the middle there. Now with the buffed up Emperor, you don't even need to play the full allotment of Wonder Boy, and you can just plop another 7k. Say you sipped out your deck for Dudley Daisy, for example, that won't be called from deck otherwise. You could put it behind your Dudley Emperor, and now it still makes a 21k line if you need it to against non-cross rides, non-MLB, for example. So huge buff for Emperor, no doubt, but it does have small ramifications for some of your other cards as well. Shout out to Medical Manager. Yep. Something to think about is how weaker Spike's early aggro could be without cards like Safe Freeze and Skydiver, which means the only form of aggression will come from Dan, which conflict with the CB for Dudley Emperor. Kagero gets a 3K without needing boost. Yeah. About the early game stuff, which I'm gonna talk about more in the theory deck, is that you're trading in your the higher roll nature of Skydiver. Oh, I'm sorry. You're trading in the more high roll nature of Safe Read, because Safe Read did add to your early aggression if you did check triggers timely, but the bigger loss here might be the Skydiver part of things, because it also helps you catch up in the mid game. But you're trading that in depending on how you make up your deck with consistency, because if you're playing what's his name? If you're playing Jelly Beans, for example, your deck is kind of smaller in that all your grade 1s and 2s are pretty much live to be grabbed early on. So on your grade 2 turn, you can probably ride Vanguard. You can sift off a Jelly Beans to search out Dudley Douglas, for example, and then make a 16K line or more, depending on what you have, because if you have a Dudley Phantom, so you can line up Phantom with Dudley Douglas there, and now you have 2 columns, which previous spikes had trouble in the early game before grade 3, because unless you opened up exactly like Panther with Bracky, chances are like there's a chance that Devil Summoner could miss. So then you kind of had a 7K on the board that needed some help to hit anything, which meant that you may not always been able to put that aggression on your opponent. So you kind of trade that part in, the high rolly part of it, for the consistency pieces of the Dudley engine if you choose to use it. Hope I'm making sense, because I can hear the thoughts in my head, but not always communicate it out appropriately. The superior called Diver Juggernaut is strong, but granted, you do need a bit of luck to pull it off. For this theory craft, wait and see. Yeah, this is all theory based. Like, this is just me kind of musing things over in my head and trying to see what could work in a meta that's different than the current one. Because by the time we get this, we're gonna have like Dote, MLB, Shadow Paladin, stuff like that. So the stuff that worked in set 1, like the Skydiver, Safe Read, stuff like that, probably won't work, which means we got to start trying to project ourselves into the future, like Doctor Strange, and figure out which combination of things are going to work best for us. Okay, so those are all the cards. Those are all the new cards. So now we're going to go into some theory craft stuff.